sometimes overwhelming how much we can do when I go onto the site and I'm like, oh, your cholesterol's too high. Do this, and this.
You
I'm like, oh my God, there's like 500 things to do.
could also just go to the recommendations engine and it'll give you the top things to do. You can go down rabbit holes. We allow you to do that, which a lot of people like doing. Or you could just look at the summer report. There's a summer recommendations and that's it.
Yeah. And which is important, yeah, because there are times where I've looked at, I'm like, I'm doing all of that. I've got all the top 5, and then I need to go down that rabbit hole. All right. Well, it's a real pleasure to have Joe Cohen on the show today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad we connected because I never knew that you were the creator of something that I've been using for, I think it's maybe 7 years now, more or less. And this is a tracker. It's where I track my labs, where I love testing, measuring, and assessing. This is what we're doing in biohacking. And I always tell the women in my community, like, don't just guess. Like, why don't you track, whether it's through blood work or some device or your clothes, like if you're trying to lose weight, just track and see if what you're doing is working. And that's why I love this platform, SelfDecode. And I was using it way before when it was called, what was it called? What was
Lab
it?
test analyzer.
Test Analyzer, yeah. Because it was recommended
Yeah.
to me by a nutritionist. And he's like, you should really be keeping your lab, all your lab stuff. And it was such a lifesaver because I had all these documents of papers and then the files on my computer and all that. And I should have, and you interviewed me on your podcast, which is also really great. And I have to say, I forgot to say in your podcast, like, I am not paid to do this. I am not. I am such a fan. And because it sounds like you paid me to do this. And I am really passionate about what you do and this platform. And there are other platforms out there. We could talk about all the differences and things like that. But I really think that women in this phase of life, going through this menopause transition, actually any phase of life, to be honest, I wish I was testing when I was in my 20s, but you can always be tracking. And I want to talk a little bit about the SelfDecode as a tracker later on, but just to give people a little bit of background on what you do and how you came up with this. And so it'd be interesting because you're quite young. Well, actually, you're older than I thought you were because I asked you how old you were last time I talked to you. And but you had been starting to track your data and get into this whole biohacking space way younger, probably before there was the word biohacking. So tell us a little bit why you even got into tracking and testing all your labs.
Yeah, definitely. So tracking was a huge thing for me because I had a lot of issues that weren't explained. Like I'd go to doctors, they wouldn't really know what's going on. And I just thought like, I have to understand what's going on. So I need to check out my own biology, check out what's going on under the hood, right? I want to understand how my body was ticking. I was also trying things that other people were recommending and it wasn't working. So I knew that my body was different. And I think that's how people are in general. You just come to realize that everybody's body is working a little differently.
Mhm.
And not everybody's going to do well with the same things. And so I said, okay, I need to understand how my body's working. So I started studying a lot of biology, but then I also started looking into lab testing, genetic testing, all that stuff. So studying biochemistry, studying lab testing, studying genetics, and then trying to see what I could get from what's under the hood, what's ticking, what's going on.
Mm. But did you have an illness or was something you were trying to unravel because you were quite young and usually you don't have, I bet all your friends were probably doing okay, or what happened there? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was probably the sickest of all my friends. Not probably, definitely. But now I would say now I'm the healthiest of anyone I grew up with. But before I was the sickest, right? You could see how much you could change with once you understand how your body's working, you could just do these smaller tweaks and they could have a massive difference. But yeah, it was kind of just like everything was going on and nothing was functional, pretty much. I didn't have any like hardcore disease, but nothing was just working right. Whether it's my gut, my sleep, my brain, my mood, my energy levels, just nothing that you think about just day to day was working right.
And were you going from doctor to doctor and they were like, you're fine, you're young and healthy, what's going on? Or even, are they dismissing you?
Yeah, I mean, I would go to the mainstream ones and they'd just be like, okay, you're fine. Or they'd say, I don't know.
Yeah. That's why you get down this rabbit hole and you just be teaching yourself. And so that made you come up with this idea to actually have a tracker, an online tracker to keep all of your lab work in the same place?
Well, I just, when I got lab work, it wasn't even the tracking part was something that I more like realized when it was built. I was like, oh, this is cool. I could just search for any lab marker and it'll come up and show me exactly what I need to do. But it was more like you'd have a lab marker and then I'd be like, I don't know what to make of this thing. What are the recommendations? What are the optimal ranges? And I don't know where to get this information. So, and then maybe even if you could get it one at a time, you want to upload 100 markers and then see what are all the ones that are suboptimal that are coming back and then be able to check those. So it needed to be digitized and automated, and there needed to be recommendations. And then you want recommendations for more than one marker. You don't just want to look at one at a time. And then, you also want recommendations for genetics. You want recommendations for symptoms and conditions and goals. And so we put it into one platform, and that's what the SelfDecode platform is. You could upload labs, genetics, or symptoms, conditions, goals, and they'll give you recommendations, and it'll show you how each recommendation interacts with each of these individual parameters.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet a lot of people, I was the same as well. I'd get a bunch of labs done and you have to make the doctor's appointment and go back and say, what does this mean? What do I do?
Mhm.
And usually it's quite short and not very effective. But the SelfDecode platform actually gets into quite a lot of detail. And I think nowadays I've seen people in our community just going into Chat GPT, go, okay, these are my labs. Tell me what it means, because they don't want to pay for a doctor's appointment and they want to hear what that says. So how are you dealing with that? Or is that competition for platforms like yours?
It might be in the future. Not right now. It doesn't work well. I mean, I've tried it on myself. Other people have tried it. It doesn't read all the labs properly. It doesn't have the optimal ranges. It doesn't know. It's just ChatGPT doesn't work and doesn't know the recommendations very well, right? So it works well when there's a lot of information on a subject. When it's a niche subject and it doesn't really know all the information, it breaks down sometimes. And even if it works 50% of the time, if you're dealing with your labs and your health, you don't want it to work 50% of the time. That's the problem. So maybe in 2 years, it could be 100% and it'll be great. But, a lot of the information is not publicly available.
Mm.
So, I mean, it's very niche. You have to really look at tables and figures, and it's hard to be scanned by just ChatGPT.
Mhm.
So it's an area where it's not there yet. It could be there in a year, 2 years, who knows, 3, 5, I don't know. But it's just not, they don't read it properly. They don't analyze it properly. They don't give you the proper recommendations. And they can't give you the optimal ranges. So there's a lot of areas where they're just not there yet.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's great for a bunch of stuff, but just doesn't work with genetics either at all.
Mm.
It could tell you certain genes, but you can't feed it your genes. You can't just feed it a file of genes and read it. It can't work. It's
Yeah.
too specialized.
Mm. There's probably error as well. And because how many times
Yeah.
something on ChatGPT and you're like, well, actually, sorry, this is wrong. And it's, oops, sorry, you're right. And then
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
well, that's going to be a big mistake if I didn't know or didn't catch it. So there is some error. You have to probably be a little careful. And so, but the platform that the SelfDecode, what I really liked about it, even when it was Lab Test Analyzer, it was giving me optimal ranges, because I already knew back then I didn't want to be normal. I wanted to be optimal. And so that's really important. And I think more and more people are becoming aware of that we do want to get into this optimal range if we want to optimize our health and have a longer, healthier life. So that's been really unique for me from day one. And actually, I have barely even scratched the surface of what you can do in that platform, because it's just somewhere I was just uploading my labs and just watching the curve. And it's really interesting, like when you have 7 years of data, to see how things have changed. And I think it's so important, because you're not going to go back to your files and try to plot this out. And if you have, it's a lot of work. So
Right.
one thing I do wish I had done, I wish I knew about it from I don't know, when the day one, when did you launch the platform? How long ago was that?
That was 2018, I think.
Yeah. 2018?
Was it? Yeah, but I would say you probably wouldn't have wanted to use it in the beginning. Just it was a little buggy. But we've been working on it since and adding information, and it's not easy to. It's something that a lot of the information wasn't easily accessible, so you really have to dig into all the details, and it's not simple. I'll give you an example. I just looked up just to see like, okay, what comes up now. So like, I'm curious because I haven't used it for this purpose in like 4 months, or let's see what improvement there is. What is the optimal range for ferritin? Okay. So like I said, it's not going to give you the optimal ranges, good optimal ranges. It won't give you good recommendations, and it won't also take in it won't take in the data properly. It also won't like save the information that you could easily search it after, right?
Are you talking about
That's,
check? You're doing a little.
yeah. ChatGPT. So
Yeah.
anyway, I just looked up what's the optimal ranges. It said 30 to 100 for women, 30 to 300 for men. That is not the optimal range, clearly. If you read the studies, it's not. 30 is you're already like iron deficient, right? It's definitely not optimal. So 35 is not optimal. 40. The studies are pretty clear that you want to have sufficient levels. I mean, you could argue if it's 70 or 80 or 90 should be optimal, right? The lower end, but 30 is not, right? Like I said, they're not giving you optimal ranges at this stage. They're just kind of telling you what's normal, and that's that.
Yeah.
And they're just saying, like, maybe if you really try to hijack it and keep on annoying it and say, no, but that's normal. Tell me the optimal.
Yeah.
I don't know. But then it starts hallucinating when you start trying to hijack it. It'll just tell you whatever you want to know, like whatever you want it to be.
Yeah. So what kind of testing do you recommend our community, well, women in peri and postmenopause, to do right now? And we're also thinking not just, okay, feeling better and menopause symptoms and all that, but healthy aging. We want to look at our future selves and make sure that we're in this optimal range. But what do we test? And you offer so many different tests as well. Like, where do we even get started?
So I think a genetic test is always the number one test you could do for bang for your buck. And the reason is because if you think about it, how many genes, how many variants you have, how many things it could tell you, you're getting so much information from just one test. Now, that's not the case with all the companies. Sometimes most of the companies, they're looking at maybe 10 genetic variants, 5, 50. In that case, it's probably equivalent to a lab test, but it's not giving you that much information, but it still could be somewhat useful. But when you're really looking at advanced, like 200 million variants, and it could tell you anything you want to know, so a sophisticated system like SelfDecode, that's when it becomes the best bang for your buck. So it's like, I would say like genetic testing, as other companies are doing it, are maybe worth a lab test or whatever, but so I think overpriced and you're not getting that bit of information. But when you're really getting something sophisticated, I would say it's the best bang for your buck in terms of what you can get from one test.
So, and usually you do this just once in your life. You don't have to keep serum levels.
Yeah.
So, but if there are people out there like me who said, oh, I've done 23andMe, or we've done other genetic testing, this is like years ago, some of us are early adopters. Does that mean, so if I want the full data, I can't just put my raw data into SelfDecode, or do I have to actually take another genetic test?
So there's a few things. The raw data is not changing, right? The problem is when you download a 23andMe file, they're not giving you all the raw data.
They're
That's
not.
number one. No.
Why would it's my data? Like, why wouldn't they give it to
They
me?
only give you what they sequence or genotype.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So they're going to give you what they genotype, which is 700,000 variants around, but they won't give you, but the lab gives other data that they just don't give you. The reason they don't give it to you is because you won't be able to open up the file on your computer. You'll start complaining that like, hey, you have to be like a developer with special software tools. So it's like it's like if I give you all the code to some computer program, you're not going to be able to open it up and know what's going on. So they give you just a text file that is more readable and openable but that cuts out information.
Mm.
And the information is something that they leave out is important. So that's number one. Is you're not getting, if you just download a text file, you're not actually getting all the information from the lab.
Interesting. Okay. So then it would be worthy to do another test.
There's also more to it, but a lot of tests, if it's not accurate enough, there has to be a cutoff of like 99% accuracy. But a lot of labs will just pass it through if it's 95%. So if you didn't get it at a good lab, it could be used advanced software after that to do all different kinds of things to it. It breaks down if it's not 99% accurate. If it's 95%, then the whole thing breaks down. So 23andMe is pretty decent, but there's a lot of others that are not so good. But either way, and then the other thing is, a lot of things happen after we upload the software, and we validate that on our chip. And when you have a different company, you have a whole bunch of different company, different variations of chips. And 23andMe has whatever 6 versions, who knows? There could be, it's just not, you might not get the same result, right? Because there's a lot of things that happen after the processing. So those are the reasons why you would want to get, even if the actual SNPs are going to be the same, it's not so simple.
Interesting. So if I were to upload my data from 23andMe and then also take the SelfDecode test and have that uploaded, how different do you think they would be?
It's impossible to know exactly, but it could be, you'll get some things that are different, right? It is going to be some genetic, it's more in the polygenic risk scoring that it's going to be different. So in the polygenic risk scoring, which is where we combine thousands or millions of SNPs to give you an overall risk for an area. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I really think everyone at some point should be doing genetic testing. If you haven't done it, go and do it.
And by the way, if you're doing another company and they're only doing 50,000 variants, then they can't even be uploaded because we don't have enough data to feed it into our system.
Yeah.
So a lot of these companies that you're doing genetic testing with, a lot of these other companies, they're not giving you enough data at all. But like 23andMe does give you enough data. But even then, that's probably the best case scenario. But even then, it's going to be a little different.
Yeah.
That's why for SelfDecode, for the medical stuff, we want you to get our kit, just because we don't want you to have wrong information that's very medically relevant.
Yeah, and important. So what about then serum testing, urine testing, saliva testing? Are there any tests that you would recommend women in this phase of life and for our future to be doing to protect our future self?
Yeah, we can go into lab testing now. So I think women there's different kinds of issues that women suffer from, and you want to test for those things. So vitamin D, I think, is a good starting point.
The what?
Vitamin D for bone health and a whole bunch of other things.
Foundation.
But I think people know about that. And just bone health, immune function, mood. Thyroid hormones are really important, right? So women often have hypothyroidism for metabolic control, and could also be linked to hormonal imbalances. So I think thyroid, you want to do a full thyroid panel, TSH, total and free T4, total and free T3, and then check for thyroid antibodies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think those are, Then there's I would do like fasting, blood glucose, and insulin. Those are good for everybody, right? I'd say, especially if you're getting hypoglycemic or anything like that. But for anybody, it's for aging, it's for general health, metabolic health. You want to check your insulin and fasting glucose. And women start to also gain weight as they get older, like men. And you could see how your insulin's doing. If your insulin's high, then that will be a cost.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can work on bringing that down. Then I would say bone mineral density is the big one. So doing a DEXA scan when you're older than 40, you should really check it at the earliest possible time so that you have a baseline. And because it also, to fix it actually takes a long time. It's not
Yeah.
something that you could fix in 2 days. But the good thing is that there's a lot of medications, not a lot, but there's a medication that is for osteoporosis that is actually a longevity drug as well.
Mhm.
But there's also a lot of natural supplements that do it. So if you catch it early on, you could start taking supplements, and also lifestyle factors like weight training. It could definitely, if your bone mineral density is not high, then when you hit 60, 70, you fall, it's game over, right? Like people die like 6 months after a hip fracture or something like that, right? It's because you can't move at that point. So it's actually, bone mineral density is a big reason why people die in their 60s, 70s, 80s. If your bones get too fragile. And it's always a relevant factor because people always fracture, right? Even when you're young or whatever, right? You fall, it's not like a rare occurrence. And so and it's also an indicator of general health as well, if you're doing the right things, right? So,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
the stats that I always use is 30% of the people over the age of 65 who have a fall and a fracture die within a year. And that's right, crazy to think. And
yeah.
you are younger, okay, you have a fall, you fracture, you repair, and you get up and you go again. But the quality of life when you're older is you just go on this downward spiral. Because even if you do recover, let's say you don't die, it's a very slow recovery, if at all. And
And
then
then you can't exercise for a long time. You can't get out. It limits your life too much.
I totally agree on that, on getting that tested. But can you, in terms of self-decode, do you upload your DEXA
You
scores?
could, yeah. You could upload a DEXA score. Yeah.
We haven't done
And
that.
then you could check.
You can do.
Yeah. You could track it over time. I've uploaded mine, and yeah. And so you could see what the optimal is. And so I would recommend you do that. And also you could look up your risks for osteoporosis, osteoarthritis. And there's a bone report there as well. So you could see what your genetic predisposition is, and you could see what your actual results are.
Yeah, that's what's really cool, actually, because that's what, at least the platform now, you plug in your data. And yeah, if you can say, okay, one, you're at higher risk. Two, oof, your vitamin D is really low. And three, you got maybe you plug in your weight, or you're maybe
Mhm.
lean and you get less impact on your bones or something like that, that you are actually greater risk of fracturing a bone. And then if you were to upload then your DEXA score, and if it's osteopenia or osteoporosis, well, then that's when we get a lot of information. I find it sometimes overwhelming how much we can do when I go onto the site and I'm like, oh, your cholesterol's too high. Do this, 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 and this. And I'm like, oh my God, there's like 500 things to do. But
But you could also just go to the recommendations engine, and it'll give you the top things to do.
yeah, that's true.
Meaning, like, yeah, you could go down rabbit holes. We allow you to do that, right? Which a lot of people like doing. Or you could just look at there's like a summer report, there's a summer recommendations, and that's it.
Yeah. And which is important, yeah, because there are times where I've looked at, I'm like, I'm doing all of that. I've got all the top 5. And then I need to go down that rabbit hole because
Correct.
what
Exactly.
can they do? But that's really cool. And you do have a lot of supplements that are recommended and things. Which supplements do you think I'm not sure if you look at the database or what you're seeing, but what is moving the needle the most in terms of supplements for bone health?
Yeah. So let's take a step back and let's look at, okay, the bone mineral density is a great test. It's the best test you're going to do for bone health, right? And then if it's not very good, you're going to want to see, what is that from? So there's actually many things that can relate to bone mineral density. And by the way, you can see this if you look on the bone reports, they'll tell you which lab tests to check for.
Mhm.
But I can just tell you some offhand, right? So you have vitamin D, you have testosterone, you have estrogen, you have parathyroid hormone, right? You've got maybe serum calcium, but yeah, you got your hormones, which are going to be very important for the bone health. And then you got IGF-1. So that's also very important for bone health.
Explain IGF-1 for those who don't understand.
Insulin like growth factor 1. So that's growth factor, and it helps grow muscles, bones, everything, brain
Yeah.
cells.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that it's not like, oh, the more the better, right? When you're looking at longevity markers as well, if you talk to Dr. Walter Longo, he's like, oh, you want that low. But
It needs to be balanced. Yeah, it should be
yeah.
balanced. Also depends on when, and I think depends on what your goals are also, right? So it depends on what your weaknesses are. It depends on also what you're susceptible to. If you're susceptible to cancer, then IGF-1 can make your cancer cells grow.
Mhm.
For me, for example, I don't have a lot of susceptibilities to cancer based on family history, but also based on my genetics.
Mhm.
So I'm more okay with more IGF-1. I do better. It's good. It also grows your gut. So it's good for leaky gut. And it also depends on how old you are and what your goals are, right? Like maybe you want to have better cognitive function than live. I think it's more, there's two factors to it. There's cancer and then there's just like extreme longevity.
Mhm.
But maybe you decide that you're fine living to 100. But Dr. Longo is looking more at theoretical mechanisms of aging and things. A lot of these things don't come to play until much later on, right? So unless you're susceptible to cancer, right? In that case, but you could also do things against cancer. So it depends on if you're somebody who wants muscle mass. So you do want IGF-1, right? There's an IGF-1 growth hormone axis. And so people measure IGF-1 also to measure growth hormone. It's a proxy. So you can't measure growth hormone very well. So it's something that I think I see some people with very low IGF-1. And if they want to build muscle, it's important that they increase it. I personally do well with higher IGF-1.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to think of like people are not, I don't think anyone's dying from high IGF-1
Mhm.
before they're like 90, right? It's unless they have cancer and
Yeah.
then it just helped the cancer grow.
Mhm.
But even probably before 100, but you take cancer out of the equation and then I think you could die from low IGF-1 because your muscles and your bones are going to be good, right? So
Exactly. It's always about,
that's why,
yeah. There seems like there's always a trade-off, and this is the thing that's ever perfect. Then that's why we get into our own bio-individuality and then our own goals, right? What is it that you want and
Mhm.
you're worried for? So let's go back to then those supplements or the testing actually, because all of these are together. You can test your thyroid, you can test your estradiol and your testosterone,
Mhm.
calcium, vitamin D, IGF-1, and supplement with some of these things as well. And that's, if you are low, it would make sense. Okay, let's get our vitamin D levels up and take a vitamin D supplement or go outside or absorb it from the sun, whatever it is that you do. Are there any other testing or supplements that you think we should be doing for bone density?
Absolutely. I think homocysteine is related to bone density, right? And I think that's something that you want in general because it's also related to methylation, and methylation is related to a lot of hormone issues. So
Mhm.
I think methylation is very big in functional health. And I would say I'm an outsider when it comes to mainstream or functional health, but I actually think it's quite important. Methylation is actually quite important. I just think that the way that it's done is yeah, but basically you could look at genetics for methylation. You could look at your lab test for methylation. Homocysteine is a good marker for methylation. And you have a lot of good genetic stuff for methylation. So there's methylation pathways. There's methylation, just for example, my methylation report in SelfDecode says I'm an undermethylator. And I know that to be true. Undermethylator.
Under methylator. But
Yeah.
aren't there times that we want to be methylating and times that we don't want to be methylating? Do we always want to be? Or it's kind of like the genes. We don't want them all switched on. We want the cancer genes off and we want the muscle building genes on. Is it the same thing with methylation?
In the strict scientific sense, it is. Meaning like, yes, you're not methylating, but in the practical sense, not really. You could look at homocysteine and see where you are, right? As overall methylating, right? Are you methylating? But what I find is people, almost nobody has too low of homocysteine.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
So
interesting. Yeah. I didn't
yeah, so in that sense, you're looking at a global marker of it's an overall marker of methylation that a lot of things can influence, but you're just seeing that some people have low homocysteine just because they're not eating enough protein.
yeah.
But maybe somebody's over methylating, but Really, it's more like somebody's methylating properly or just somebody's not methylating enough. And then if they're not, I think the genetics is very good test for that, meaning it really hit it for me and I see it hit it well for other people. Some people just see MTHFR as methylation. So we have an MTHFR report that you can look at.
Hmm.
We also have an overall methylation report, which I think is also very important, which people do not look at because other companies just usually focus on MTHFR alone. So you could look at MTHFR, which I have that variant, but then you could look at overall methylation. And then I would also recommend looking at a comprehensive methylation pathway to see where in the methylation it's off. And that's where either your biohacker or functional medicine doctor, they can like, if they're trained, they could look at the pathway. But we have 3 reports on this. One is MTHFR, one is the methylation overall. So it's going to tell you under, over. And then one is a methylation pathway where you can see specifically where it's off and what recommendations to do for each of these actually.
Mm. Oh my goodness.
So that was very interesting for me. And so it's not so much that you're, like I said, yeah, in a strict scientific sense, you don't want to be only methylating all the time, right? But in the practical sense, I found that when I take supplements that help me with methylation, they bring my homocysteine to a normal level, a healthy level. And that's a good thing.
What
I
supplement
wouldn't say,
for
yeah.
the homocysteine?
Well, I'll tell you in a second, but homocysteine, just so you know how we got into it, is also related to bone density. It's related to cardiovascular disease, related to a whole bunch of things, neurodegenerative disease. So I think it's a good marker. It's causal also, so it does damage itself, but it's also a good marker for, in general, like I think health and methylation. And so it's something that you want to check, especially if you've got bone health issues. Yeah. But anyway, what do I do for homocysteine? My homocysteine. So there's a lot of supplements I take because I'm a very significant undermethylator. I'm like in the 90, it said I'm in the 99th percentile of undermethylation. So I got to really, yeah. And it's true. It's true. I could see it in reality as well. It's not, when you see the genetics, like it makes sense for me because for me, for example, exercise I always found that wasn't good for me. Right. And part of the reason is because I'm an undermethylator. So when you exercise or you stress your body, you use methyl groups.
Yeah.
And you kind of want this like storage of methyl groups around or these different molecules to be able to, when you need, basically the reason why I was saying that it doesn't, in practice, doesn't exactly work like that is because you want these storage of molecules so that when you need to methylate, you can. But it's not like you're just going to use them when you don't need to methylate. So it's there if you need it. It's not like it forces upon your system methylation when you don't need it, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I would say my homocysteine was very difficult to bring down, even with a whole bunch of supplements that lower the methylation. I had to really do a bunch of stuff. So the thing that brought up my homocysteine the most out of anything was exercise. So it was interesting because homocysteine, when I didn't exercise much, it was normal. When I barely exercise.
It's something around up to 10 or something like that, right? It's not a big.
Well, normal is up to 15. Normal is up to 9.
Is up to what?
9.
9. Okay. Yeah. It's okay. 0 to 9 is the optimal. 0? Is it 0 or is it?
I'd say 5 to 9. If you're below 5, there's probably some protein deficiency or something like that.
Okay. So 5 to 9. It's quite a tight range. And
but your body will naturally be found in that range if you're healthy. Like it's tight range, you're right, but it should be found there, right? That's where it is. Typically when the studies, they more like show just it's dose dependent. The higher the homocysteine, the worse. But the thing is that if you're lower than 5, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
So it's causally bad and also correlatively, meaning it's associated with not good thing.
Yeah.
But if you're lower than 5, something's probably wrong, right? Yeah. Like you're not getting enough amino acids, not enough methionine or something. But so I would say that for me, exercise and also getting sick. So if you get an infection, it also takes up methyl groups. So exercising, infections, for some reason, a lot of stressors in the body could take up methyl groups. And what I saw was that people in India had very high homocysteine levels.
Why?
I think they're just around a lot of stressors, right? Pollution, infections, their body is stressed from the environment, and
Yeah.
you see very high homocysteine levels. So I
They,
would say that,
they also,
Mm,
sorry to interrupt you, when I look at women going into menopause, their menopause birth date, it's much younger in women in India. I think it's about 46, where the average in the Western world is 51. And part of that,
mm,
malnutrition, stressors, poor medical care. So there's something, yeah, it's kind of, it makes a little sense to me as well, what you're saying.
okay, yeah, that could make sense. For me, the methylation supplements that I take, and again, I have to titrate it, but exercise, getting infections, when I do a lot of testing, I could see these are the things that actually made a big difference in my homocysteine. But then I saw that if I just take a high enough dosage of supplements, it gets my homocysteine in the right range. Now, trimethylglycine is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Or betaine. That is a very good methyl one. You want to make sure that your B vitamins are all good. So there's B6, B9, and B12. So methylfolate, the methylated versions or the active versions. Those help. And then I would say those are the two of them. And I would say the first thing is you want to make sure that you have enough B vitamins, right? Mm,
Have you heard about creatine increasing or decreasing or optimizing your homocysteine?
It doesn't do anything.
It does it? Yeah, because I was doing it for a while and it looked like it was working. I was like, wow, because I read a study or something showing this. And I was like, oh, okay. And then the last time I tested, it didn't work. So I'm like, oh, darn it. And I don't know if it's because of something else, but interesting that you found you don't see its work. Is it, you're saying it doesn't work on you yourself or just in general?
Both.
Yeah,
So there's maybe one study that shows it works, but then there's like three that shows it doesn't.
yeah, probably.
Me, and then I tried it on myself, it doesn't work. But yeah, overall the studies show that it does not work.
Mm.
Doesn't change. Yeah, it doesn't change the
Same.
homocysteine levels. Yeah.
So how, yeah, go ahead. Go finish. I might have another question.
So then there's NAC actually helped lower my homocysteine.
Oh, NAC. Oh, okay. I
Mhm.
take that. That's one of my,
It's not for methylation. That actually directly breaks down homocysteine, actually. So
so if you're,
it's
you don't want to be taking it or be mindful of it.
yeah. I mean, I guess you could say that, but I don't.
Most people,
Yeah, I would say it's not. No, so low homocysteine is not causally bad. It's just that it could indicate. Meaning, even if you're low in homocysteine, you get it lower. It's still not bad.
yeah.
It just can indicate something is.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So get the TMG, the vitamin B vitamins, the NAC, and in addition to exercise. Thickness.
Yeah, and then there's things like taurine.
Taurine.
That helps. Mhm.
Yeah. I just started taking that. Or I take it when it was first recommended to me to take it when you take omegas, because if they were oxidized or not so great, then you sort of offset that. That being said, I did an interesting interview with one of the leading researchers on omegas. He specializes in omega 3s. And he said that they did an experiment because this guy wrote in over 300 research papers, kind of a person. And he said they did an experiment where they really they manipulated the omegas to oxidize them. And then they gave them to humans.
Mhm.
Oh my God, what are you doing? And he said, nothing changed. And I was,
Mhm.
so he was kind of like, don't worry about the oxidation in your omegas. I was like, are you kidding me? I've been taking taurine for this just in case,
Mhm.
but maybe it's good anyways for my homocysteine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, taurine is definitely good for the homocysteine. Mm. And then I would say MSM probably had one of the biggest impacts on my homocysteine.
MSM. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
What you're doing actually is, I understand, because you have access to this all the time, you're probably testing very regularly, and then you
Mhm.
test molecules one by one, where most of us can't quite do that. So when you say that made they move the lever the biggest, I'm guessing because you testing, and how often are you testing in between your experiments?
I'm testing like on average once or 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's a dream.
Mhm.
That's like my dream. Okay, yeah. So that's pretty amazing. If we could all do that, hopefully one day we can all be doing that. But you got test kits on your website, like home kits, and they're just blood pricks, or how does that work?
So you talking about for genetics or for blood tests?
Just for blood tests.
Yeah, it's right now we just connect to Quest, so it's only in the US, but we're going to send like, we've been trying to do it for some time, but it's a little tricky because a lot of the ones that for the finger pricks, they're not so accurate.
Mm.
And so that's something we realized. And so then we said, okay, let's go for the Tasso device, which is probably the only one that's accurate in terms of like the
That's
at-home ones.
yeah. It's just something like it's like your own blood draw or something. I mean, how does
Yeah, but you put it on your arm.
it seem?
Yeah, the finger pricks are not accurate enough, unfortunately. So that's why, I mean,
But you're actually filling a little vial, right, of blood, not just a
a little vial. Yeah, a tiny vial. Yeah.
yeah. And people
It's,
do that on their own easily, or is this kind of
yeah. I've done it on my own. I've done it on my own.
have
It's
you done
pretty
it on your
easy.
own because
Just
you're a crazy biohacker, or is it like the able to
if the average person can do it, you just put it on your arm
oh
and it takes out the blood. We're not selling it right now, but we will be selling it. The tassel is more expensive. Again, we're going back and forth. We're seeing what the best options are. W- Yeah, we're still trying to see what the best options are. And but we will be doing that right now. We just have gone to the lab. At one point we did have an at-home one, but then we stopped it. It wasn't a good supplier. And then like a good lab. So we want to make sure we get it right, that we have a good lab that is doing it.
mm. Okay, so for now, people can either get test kits through you or through the Quest labs from your website, or they just go into their labs or ask their doctors, give them some test. Then
Yeah, they can upload any existing test that they have.
yeah, and you've got this automatic
Mhm.
like reader. You can just you don't need
Mhm.
to plug it in. I mean, you can do things manually, but also you can just throw the whole document up there and it just
Right.
keeps it which is I think is brilliant and all that. But I'm gonna have to wrap up. I've still so many questions. But before I let you go, is there anything new and upcoming or that you'd like to share with us that's going on in SelfDecode?
Yeah, we just released a detox report, a detox pathway. So we had a detox report, but this is a detox pathway. The pathway allows you to look at the whole pathway, and it just goes way more into detail on where things are broken. Same like the methylation pathway. And so actually I was a little skeptical of these pathway reports just because like, I don't know, it's just, I don't know, like until we released it, I wasn't sure if I was going to like it myself. It's just, we made it because we got a lot of feedback that people want methylation pathway. They want detox pathway. I'm like, okay, whatever. Let's just do it. So we got a lot of feedback from practitioners. This is what they want. And I also worked on it a lot. And so I tried to make the thing that was best, but then until you see the results, you don't really know like
Yeah.
how you're going to like look at this for you. But then when I looked at it, it was quite interesting. I was like, oh, this really nailed it down. Like the chemicals I'm sensitive to, all the cofactors that will help me detox that I found. Actually, these are the things that help me detox in general. And it's not something that I was able to like just figure out through any tests or anything. Just I was figuring these things out through mega dosing thousands of supplements and trying every supplement on the market. But here it just clearly showed these things and shows like which gene, which enzyme, which cofactor was needed to, which gene is broken, which cofactor is needed to make it work better, and then which toxins are like not good for that gene.
Wow. So, for example, in menopause, we're looking at our hormones and we're always talking about detoxification of estrogen. So, and that's why we do these Dutch tests or dried urine tests, 24-hour urine metabolite tests. And so I'm wondering if that test, your detox, look at those detox pathways, would it be similar in the sense that we could see how our estrogen is detoxifying and then get recommendations to take NAC or glutathione or indoflucarbinol or whatever it is that we need. Like, would it work like that?
Yeah, a bit like that. It's not focused on estrogen. It's focused on general detox. We're going to have one that's focused on hormones. So
Okay.
there's specifically focused on hormones. That should be that we're working on now. But that's the next one coming out, one focused on hormones. I mean, there are some things that are related to, estrogens, but it's mainly related to like general toxins in
Mhm.
the environment.
Mm. Oh, okay. Okay. Do you have any urine tests available or kits on the site?
Urine, no. We just sell right now from Quest, but in terms of blood testing, but our main test is the genetic test, which is a swab.
Yeah, this is
This-
swab in the
It's a swab. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, okay.
I could show you if you want to see the detox report. I could show
Yeah.
by the way, we have like 1,500 reports. I mean, we have a crazy amount of reports. So it
Wow.
really, I mean, you probably have seen how many reports like we have, but
That's so much insane. It's
right. So it really depends on what you want to
look,
get from right, what you want to look at. If you're someone concerned with methylation, if you're someone concerned with longevity, osteoporosis, then you could look at the osteoporosis reports. So yeah, it really depends on what you want to look at. It's very comprehensive. It goes through all the phase 1, phase 2. It'll tell you if you're sensitive to xenoestrogens or things like that. But it goes through all the different types of chemicals, and you can see if you're sensitive to those chemicals, mold, a whole bunch of different things, right?
oh, cool. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe. Well, we'll let you go. I really appreciate your time, and it's been so enlightening. I mean, it's just so cool to meet you after I've been using this platform for so long. I recommend everyone to go and just throw your labs up there. Tell us a little bit quickly also what, in terms of security, somebody goes, oh, I don't know if I want all my data up there. What kind of security measures do you have?
We have very strict security. Because we work with doctors, we also work with other businesses. So we have to make sure we have a team that they work on security as well. And I mean, privacy, we have very strict privacy policies. We're HIPAA and GDPR compliant. So almost no genetic companies are HIPAA and GDPR compliant. We went through a very long process to make sure we're compliant with strict standards
Yeah.
for security. And then we also have very strict privacy terms and conditions.
Cool.
So nobody's data is being sold or anything like that.
Oh, good. All right. If anybody wants to get 10% off at SelfDecode, you can use the code ZORA, ZORA, at selfdecode.com. I have a link to that in the show notes. And you can also just check out their website, their Instagram, their LinkedIn. I've got that, and your email as well. All this will be in the show notes. And I'm grateful for your time and explaining all of this to us. And I'm so excited to see how SelfDecode keeps unraveling itself. You know, I've been around for a long time, and I just keep seeing more and more and more happening. So it's really cool. And everyone who's gotten to the end of this podcast and you reached it, thank you so much for listening. And I hope you all have a good day, good night, good morning, wherever you're at. And then we'll see you next time. Take care.